It was a usual chilly June night in the foothills of the Aksai Chin, as 88 soldiers of the Bihar Regiment of the Indian Armed Forces scouted along the rocky and glaciated Galwan terrain. Apparently, that night, a regiment of the Chinese Tibetan Command of the PLA had infiltrated into the Indian territory and had set up a post west of the river Galwan. Who entered into whose terrain has not been clarified yet and has been a matter of debate. As per the ceasefire, the troops were recommended to stay 1 kilometer away from the LAC, dividing both nations to avoid a scuffle. But little did the Indian scouts know how cruel the night could end up to be. As they had been commanded to secure west side of the river Galwan, they kept to the west of the valley. But when they arrived at the river Shok Galwan junction, they observed something. Colonel Santosh Babu, the leader of the squad, went ahead to talk to the infiltrators and informed them that they were inside the Indian administered territory. Things didn't go well with the Chinese, and it ended up being one of the most horrific incidents between the two major global superpowers.
Nuclear powers facing off in a remote corner of the Himalayas. Monday, Indian and Chinese soldiers fought on disputed land using stones and
हमारे जवानों का बलिदान व्यर्थ नहीं जाएगा। हमारे लिए भारत की अखंडता और संप्रभुता सर्वोच्च है और इसकी रक्षा करने से हमें कोई भी रोक नहीं सकता।
So, now the big question. Are we going towards a third world war? I answered this question on my first episode of the NLO. With India already having started flexing its military might in the Himalayas, will we be able to rally the world in our support and tame the dragon? Or are we just missing something? For that, we need to go some days back. In the meantime, the US Navy, as a display of power, has disembarked the 7th Fleet with 3 carrier groups to the South China Sea. This display of naval superiority is in response to 3 main reasons. First, the US wanted to show the world that their forces are unaffected by the global pandemic, which had a grip on its crew a few days back. There have been a host of protests by the people of Hong Kong to be able to function as a fully fledged democracy. This development has caught the attention of the world and the US Senate, which passed a bill to protect Hong Kong's sovereignty. And the most important and immediate reason for this development is to stronghold the country of Taiwan, which is a pro-democratic and has recently elected President Tsai Ing-wen, who has opposed unification with the communist China and has strong inclination towards the United States. If that was not enough, the US also approved $2 billion worth of military hardware to Taiwan, which drew huge opposition from the Communist Party, calling it a direct breach of their country's integrity, threatening to take over the island nation by force. The USS Nimitz of the 3rd Fleet left San Diego port for Guam on 8 June, according to CBS News 18. It united with the USS Theodore Roosevelt, quarantined for testing COVID-19 at Guam. USS Theodore Roosevelt and USS Ronald Reagan departed from Guam and Okinawa respectively, together on 11th June to patrol the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. This extremely dangerous deployment was last seen in January of 2017 against North Korea's nuclear program and clearly signifies US's willingness to go to war. Unlike 1996, when Chinese Navy was ridiculed by the US and was forced to retreat by the superpower, This time, the Chinese are not willing to back off, even if it means fighting a two-front war, one on the Pacific and other in the Himalayas. This strong foreign policy comes at the confidence of an extremely strong economy of 12.25 trillion USD, at around 63% of the US economy and nearly eclipsing the Indian economy of 2.7 trillion USD by almost 5 times. Over the last decade, the Chinese military has shifted its focus from being a force-dominating military to a technology-based military with a high funding to R&D of military-industrial complexes. Let's see what will be the probable alignment in the situation of a war breaking out. In the Chinese side, we will have Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Egypt. In South America, Argentina, Colombia, Venezuela, and only Cuba in North America. The US side will have the NATO, Australia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, Japan, South Korea. North Korea will be Chinese allied, India and Saudi Arabia. But by this time, the Chinese are hugely outpowered, unless this country decides to join it. There are many reasons for Russians to favor China. In response to its aggressive foreign policies, the USA has slapped it with a series of allocative economic sanctions. The reasons stated being annexation of Crimea and Ukraine, trade with countries already under US sanctions like Venezuela, North Korea and Syria, malicious cyber involvement in US elections, abuse of human rights, and alleged use of chemical weapons. That being said, in such a tough time, China turned a helping hand to Russia, and their President Xi Jinping even termed Vladimir Putin as a best friend as their trade quantity bulged to greater than $100 billion by 2080. Some might say Russians have good relations with India and they won't take China's side, but they have more reasons to be in this war than not to be. With NATO clawing into post-Soviet nations such as Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Macedonia, inching closer towards Russian mainland. With Russian allies being bombarded in the name of NATO peacekeeping missions, such as the Serbian bombings of Kosovo in 1999, Iraq's invasion of Saddam Hussein in 2003, assassination of General Soleimani of Iran in 2020. Without access to the Mediterranean, the Russians annexed Crimea and Ukraine quite easily, because it was mostly Russian ethnic majority. To strengthen its hold in the Middle East, Russia cleaned the ISIS from northern Syria with support from President Bashar al-Assad. But the US started blaming Russia and Assad's regime for causing instability and in turn started funding rebel groups in Syria to overthrow Assad. So what do you think about this? Let me know in the comments below.